Hey everybody, it's your favorite reconstructionist, Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and welcome to episode number 37 of the one and only show bringing you tips and tricks for working vehicle collision cases from the best experts in the industry every Wednesday. Today's topic is, it's duck season, rabbit season. No, it's motorcycle season. So hold on tight. Here we go. Before I finish this intro, another life will be lost to a vehicle crash, and the $500 billion economic impact of vehicle crashes will only keep growing. Are you an attorney, expert witness, police officer, or insurance adjuster in charge of negotiating, investigating, or litigating vehicle collision cases? If so, then you're in the right place. The Expert Angle podcast was created for you because we believe that the industry must evolve, grow, and get better daily. And the only way to do that is by building the best team of experts possible to ensure that these crashes are handled efficiently, accurately, and honestly in order to get justice for the victims. We're Eric Brown and Phil Relly, and this is the Expert Angle. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This episode of the Expert Angle podcast is brought to you by Virtual Crash Accident Reconstruction Software. If you are tired of having to purchase, upkeep, and run multiple programs during an investigation, Virtual Crash is the cure. With Virtual Crash, you can build 3D environments using your actual scene data. You can simulate, animate, and create awesome visuals. You can also use the new momentum analysis tool for vehicle motion. Basically, Virtual Crash is the complete accident reconstruction software solution. Visit vcrashusa.com today to download your free trial or schedule a live one-on-one demonstration. Phil. Good morning and welcome to another amazing episode. Although I feel like now we have a tough few shows to follow with the last few that we've done. But I have a feeling today could do it. It could do it. Because did you ever watch Looney Tunes growing up?
Absolutely.
So there's the famous scene of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, right? And they're out there being hunted by Elmer Fudd, and he's gonna shoot one of them, and they're arguing over, is it duck season? It's rabbit season. It's duck season, rabbit season. But today, do you know what season it is?
Motorcycle season.
It is motorcycle season, 100%. And so I thought we would do a show today on motorcycles because you and I are both very avid motorcyclists. And like, I don't know about you, but I love motorcycle crashes they're probably the thing I love the most. So I thought this would be a good show to bring to the people.
They're a challenge.
They are. They're definitely a challenge. And so I thought this would be interesting. So let's just dive right in. So basic opinion. Okay. You have a motorcycle crash, and so you have an attorney who needs an expert to work this and get speeds and find some stuff out about it. Are motorcycle crashes the same as car crashes?
No.
Are they the same as pedestrian crashes?
A component of it is.
Oh, all right. So a component's there. Are they the same as a commercial motor vehicle semi crash?
Getting closer.
Yeah, almost, because both semis and motorcycles are articulated vehicles.
Semi crashes and pedestrian crashes are there's pieces of that really play in the motorcycle.
Yeah. So kind of an interesting problem because, one, a motorcycle isn't the same as a car, but yet we see a lot of experts who have only been trained in cars or only had recon, and that's it. Right. Like they come out of school and they go to recon, they get that shiny certificate. And they're like, oh, well, I can reconstruct everything now. And well, you have a basic general understanding, I would say. Yes?
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I think everybody comes out of recon with a basic knowledge of how to handle pretty much most types of crashes. Right? I mean, you got that general education.
I always make the smart aleck comment. So now you know enough to get yourself so far down the rabbit hole you can't see the opening where you came in.
Right?
Because it's not by any fault of their own. I'm not picking on them.
So you're saying it's rabbit season.
It's just that you have a different sense about your investigative style. You really want to go after the answer. You really want to go after find out the truth, what have you, whatever you want to call it. And you just take off now. You just take off running because now you feel like you feel armed with the tools to do it. And it's tough to reel yourself in and say, I need to back off, man. This is above my comfort zone. So people oftentimes take off in this little tangent, and next thing you know, they find themselves drowning.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree. And so, but what makes motorcycles so unique, and let's just start here, and I figure we'll kind of go through sort of each of the problem areas that you need to look out for. And this is important for the attorneys to understand, I think, because if you're working motorcycle crashes, you need to kind of have an understanding of why this is such a specialty niche field, niche. I don't know. Again, that one word that I hear it. What Google tell us the one day? Niche, I think.
Are you talking?
Anyway, so, but one, you guys need to understand why this is such a specific field. And for the investigators, if you guys have just come out of recon, you need to understand why you need to go get additional training if you're going to work motorcycle crashes, because they are their own animals. All right. So first, let's just dive in here. Let's talk about just the generality and the performance and the dynamics of motorcycles. Okay. Do motorcycles in the most basic sense, before it even starts to move, all right, before we even start to ride it down the road, we have to understand that, there's a few axes that pass through your car. There's the pitch axis, how the car rotates front and back, right? The roll axis, how it goes side to side, and then your yaw axis, how it rotates around its center point, right? With a car, I would say generally. Now you might have some weight shift and some body roll going around corners, stuff like that. But generally, what's the most common thing that we see with a car?
Yaw.
I agree. I think yaw would be the most common thing that we see with a car, right? How it rotates. And you guys have seen this in the curves. Car comes in, big arcing tire marks, right? As the car starts to rotate and the rear tires start to track outside of the front. Right. But with a motorcycle, what's the most common angle?
Most common angle.
Or what's the most common body movement, rotation? Realistically, I would say roll.
Yeah.
Right? Because the motorcycle has to lean to corner. Right? But now also second to that, I would say also would be pitch, because you get guys that ride wheelies, or when they come in and they vodka brake.
Because whiskey throttle is the acceleration.
Right. Well, we're gonna get to this here in just a second. Yeah. So, but when they slam on those front brakes, you get that effect. That's called a stoppie, right? Until they go over the handlebars, or when they run into a car, right? You're gonna get a pitch effect, right? Because the back end's gonna come up and it's gonna throw your rider off.
Yeah.
So they're super interesting, and they're working on the axes that you typically don't see in a car. And really you don't too often, you don't see yaw on a motorcycle. Sometimes you will.
Not without braking.
Right.
I mean, it's braking, it's brake induced. I would say almost 100% of the time, unless it washes out. And then at that point, it's not really a yaw. It's just a slide. Well, and so, it'd be hard to yaw one out.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, from just think of all the riding, from the motor officer course. Yes. I would say if you were ever going to be able to yaw a bike, it would have been in that course. And were you ever able at it? Yeah. If you're under power, if you have power to that rear wheel, are you ever going to get it to track outside of the front wheel without inducing some sort of braking or sucking the clutch in?
No, I mean, if you got power to that rear wheel, it's
just the gyroscope effect.
The only way you'd get the back trail outside of the front or track outside of the front is acceleration, and that's not a yaw.
And we're talking about in a straight line. Obviously, when you corner, your rear is going to track outside your front a little bit, but
but as far like you said, like as far as it yawing out, going into a critical speed like a corner, it just falls over because you're just going to lean. You're going to lean. I'm not turning enough. You're going to lean a little more. I mean, all this is happening very quickly in the rider's or the operator's mind, but eventually you lean past its friction capabilities, and it just plops on the surface, and two objects take off in two separate paths.
Yeah, 100%. So they're an interesting beast, and I'm glad you brought that up, because if you can't get this vehicle to really yaw when it's under power or just free rolling, right? And it has to be brake induced for the most part, because we've seen it very few times, but we have seen it, that when you get it and that rear tire does start to break out and it comes out wide. And then all of a sudden you're either going to high side the bike and you're going to throw the rider off, or you're going to low side it and wash out. All right. But when that has happened, under a few circumstances, we've seen a police officer or other investigator. I don't even know. I don't think it was a police officer. I think it was just an investigator on the private side, but they categorized that tire mark as a critical speed tire mark.
I would disagree wholeheartedly.
Well, yeah, because a critical speed tire mark, you can't be doing what? Yeah. You can't be braking.
Right.
Otherwise it just becomes a curved tire mark. So you got to watch that. You really do. And this is why it becomes so critical to have investigators that specialize in motorcycles. So, now, you look like you're getting ready to say something.
No, go ahead, because I'm sure I'll get more aggravated about it as we go.
Right. That's really, if you guys haven't noticed now, 7 episodes in, 38 episodes in, really the whole dynamic of the show is to see how aggravated I can get Phil, to where he just pops off at the mouth and then just goes. And
I'm usually pretty aggravated the moment I sign in.
Yeah. 100%. So it's just trying to just push your buttons the whole show. But no. So, okay. So we've talked a little bit about those dynamics, but let's also talk about these dynamics: acceleration and braking of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, I guess, maybe misunderstood or undercategorized. I don't know, but it frustrates me when people try to
apply car accelerations to motorcycles.
Yeah, car accelerations or car braking, characteristics to motorcycles, because they have an agenda. And man, that just pisses me off, because a bike can out accelerate any car any car.
And pretty much any bike can accelerate except for a CanAm. We have noticed under testing that and while a CanAm is capable of it, CanAms do really they act like cars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking two wheels. I'm not talking CanAm. Me personally, I don't think they should be classified as a motorcycle just because they're missing one wheel.
Right. I mean, realistically, they're a trike. They're just a reverse trike.
Yeah, but I mean, the bulk of your motorcycle, especially when you start talking sport bikes, you start talking, GSXRs and Hayabusas and stuff like that. I don't know who in their right mind thinks that they can downplay the braking because it fits their client's wishes, or underestimate acceleration. It's so frustrating, because anybody that knows anything about bikes knows a freaking motorcycle will accelerate like a beast and brake like no other.
Especially if you have an experienced rider.
Yeah, you have an experienced rider, man. Yeah, some of these younger guys that have been riding these sport bikes, they have figured it out, and they can stop these things on a freaking dime. I mean, it is crazy the braking that these things, capabilities these things produce.
Yeah,
in the right circumstance.
Yeah. So I would say too, when you're investigating motorcycle crashes, this is one where it is, I would arguably say it's even more important to find out the level of skill of the rider than any other type of crash. I mean, maybe I said that and I instantly kind of wanted to come off of it and say maybe truck drivers, because that arguably would be another skill. Maybe if that involves braking or backing. But other than that, I think motorcycles are probably, I'm going to stick with that. I think that's the number one type of crash where it matters the most, your level of skill and proficiency.
I would agree to some point. And a lot of times you can get that, talk to
family, friends.
Family, friends they ride with and whatnot. I mean, most motorcycle riders don't ride by themselves all the time. A lot of them ride with somebody, and a lot of them ride with the same somebody or somebody's. It's a group, I don't know. You need to really look into these bikes. I mean,
and when I say too, riding capabilities, we mean like actual school training, not experience. Experience is one thing. Like, we do need to know experience, but we also need to know training that they've received, because have you seen riders that have ridden for a long time that have never been trained? And really, what have they just done over 20 some years? They've reinforced bad habits.
Yeah, but I've also seen some that have never been to an official school, and they're freaking beasts on a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would put them up against anybody that would come out of the school. They'd outride circles. Yeah.
But, a lot of times you see like, and realistically, I just think back of like my dad's generation that rode and, I grew up as a little kid riding on my dad's motorcycle. So he's like, my dad's really good. He's like that. I don't think he ever went to a school. I think he went and got like one of those little enduros and then took the state test on that, got his license, and boom, just went out riding, but you go back to the generation of guys from the 60s and 70s that have been riding. And what were they always taught about the front brake?
Don't use it.
Right. Because otherwise you're going to go over the handlebars. Right. But realistically now, what have we found out about the front brake?
Yeah, I'm a front brake. I am probably a 90% front braker.
Yeah. If there's a brake that I don't use, realistically, it's going to be the back brake. But even at that, so when we get into this conversation, there's actually a proper technique for applying braking. And this is more so because of the way you're set up of your sport motorcycle or your cruisers, not necessarily your crotch rockets, different riding position. But on the cruisers, I'm gonna challenge you now, Phil. All right, you're gonna go back to Harley Davidson school here. Right. What's the actual proper braking technique that Harley Davidson teaches that is true if you do it properly and you do this on the 180 D cell, right? Or your escape and evade there. How do you apply the brakes?
It's going to be 4 fingers on the front brake. And then as you're braking coming into it, you don't stab it and get to threshold braking. It's a steady, uniform squeezing of the front brake, and as you're doing that, it is your right foot is covering the rear brake and just kind of resting on the pedal, and as you're braking with the front and that you start pitching down, it starts pushing your body forward, pulling your body forward, and it'll automatically apply the appropriate amount of rear braking onto the, with that, your inertia change of your body. You don't have to move your foot and push the brake pedal. The inertia will do it for you, and you won't lock up that rear brake. The moment you try to, oh crap, I'm not going to make it, and add rear brake, hold on, because you're going to intimately become close friends with asphalt.
Hello, asphalt. How are you today?
Yeah. Well, bam.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's always, the asphalt is always accommodating. It is always happy to see you when you are on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So But no, and Phil's exactly right. So, if we're investigating a motorcycle crash and we're interviewing somebody, or attorneys, if you're doing a depo of somebody that is riding a motorcycle, and you would ask me how much rear brake, did I use both the front and rear brakes? A lot of times a motorcycle rider, if they did it properly, might tell you that they only consciously applied the front brake, because really that was the only thought process they had. Because if your foot is set properly, the rear brake is applied automatically through the inertia of your body.
Yep.
So you never actually had that thought. Like when I ride, I don't have to think, apply the rear brake. It does it automatically when I apply the front brake.
Yep.
So just be aware of that when you guys are doing your depots, or you're taking a statement from a motorcycle rider, that if their training and skill set is high enough, that might be their mindset when they're braking.
Yeah.
So let's then pivot here and talk about, you know what? Yeah, let's pivot there and we'll talk about throttle. So this is where we get into the old whiskey throttle. So, and this has been a long running joke on the show. And I think we put it in every episode that we can about the old whiskey throttle. Just because we had I think that was actually an vehicular homicide case, wasn't it? And the investigator put that in the report, that he applied the whiskey throttle, that he whiskey throttled coming off of the. Yep. And I get it that what he was going after is wide open throttle. Kid just romps on the throttle, wah, 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 and just boom. But just say wide open throttle. I don't know that that's the appropriate place for the slang of whiskey throttle.
Yeah, and what if you're in the Napa Valley? I mean, that might be offensive to them.
That could be. Yeah. But it goes over well in Kentucky. If you're in Louisville and you're like, oh, you applied the whiskey throttle, depending on what type of, they'd be like, well, was it Buffalo Traces or was it Angel's Envy? Like, what kind of whiskey are we talking?
That may depend on the type of throttle response.
Yeah. Is it old number 7 throttle?
Yeah.
So, and if you're in Kentucky, you definitely don't want to apply Tennessee whiskey throttle.
No, that's bad.
Yeah. That'd probably be the reason you crashed your motorcycle.
Probably it.
Yeah, 100%. So,
yeah, I don't know.
But with acceleration, yeah. Can a bike out accelerate a car?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Most of the time you don't see cars realistically getting near the 1G of acceleration. I mean, most of the time, I would say 90% of your time, you're under 1G of acceleration. Motorcycles can definitely get there, especially coming off the line.
And a lot of the sport bikes, especially now, when you get into cruisers and stuff like that, those guys, most generally, unless there's some ridiculous reason why, but it would have to involve the whiskey throttle, but most of your cruisers are not accelerating hard like that, and your tourings aren't.
Yeah,
you're inexperienced riders. They'll stand out. The guys that come off of the line and they're just, man, that pipe's just screaming on a cruiser or a touring bike. That's just somebody that hasn't grown up a little bit. All excited because they got a new bike and can't wait to crash it. But
meet you at the crash scene.
Yeah, your sport bikes, man. I'm telling you what, these guys know these bikes. They know what their capabilities are. Oh my God. That's why I have never understood. I know we're going off on a different tangent, but I've never understood it, to me, why law enforcement officers pursue sport bikes. I've never got it, because I've had them pull a wheelie, flip me off, and take off, and I would just laugh and shut it down. You ain't getting that thing.
I'm right there with you.
I've never understood it, but yeah, it's ridiculous, the acceleration. And if no one's ever been on one, for those the attorneys or other experts that have never been on one, get on one. Go for a ride.
Yep.
Go for a ride with somebody that's trained, a trained operator. If you're that nervous or scared, then go with a trained rider and see what that bike can do. It will freaking.
Well, and so one of my best friends is I ride with a professional stunt rider, and I consider professional when you get paid to come out and do shows. People are giving you money to come out and do stunts. I consider you to be a professional stunt rider. So, but he was part of a big team that is up here in Northeast Ohio, and they would go out and do shows and stuff like that at different events. But I ride with him all the time, and he's unbelievable. And so it was funny actually, because so we're coming down 77 one day, and I'm just hanging back because I have a cruiser, and he's on his crotch rocket that day, and so he pulls it up, does a wheelie, and he rides this wheelie for probably, I don't know, 20 miles, probably, but he's maintaining the speed limit. And when he changes lanes, he signals and uses hand signals as he goes around cars, and he'll change lanes on it and everything. And it's hilarious because, he waves at little kids in cars as he goes by and stuff like that, and it's so funny. But I had a police officer once, and they're like, well, I would charge you with reckless op. And I'm like, okay, is he going any faster than the speed limit? Well, no. Is he signaling before every lane change? Yeah. Is he in control of the motorcycle? Yeah. What's reckless? And that's the interesting thing, because I would defy you that just because you're on one wheel, I don't think that makes you reckless.
No, it's interesting.
It might be a bad, and a lot of cities have ordinances that require you to have both wheels on the ground, but that's not reckless.
Right. I'm telling you, they're interesting. Motorcycles are very interesting, and you need to get to know a little bit about your rider. What background. Especially you get a rider that bites it, and you dig into the background a little bit, and they come from motocross racing background experience. That's a big one. And I know down here where I'm at, they have a lot of like bike nights and bike gatherings and stuff like that at some of these closed courses. And these guys will get out there and get that venom in their blood, and next thing you know, they're doing a lot of just weekend rides and going up to these close courses and riding these.
Yeah.
But I guess to digging into the investigative side of it, it aggravates me when people say, "Well, you can't do momentum on a motorcycle crash."
Oh, wait, hold on, wait. I'm getting there. We're getting to that point. Hang on, we were building up to that. Don't get ahead of me yet. I just wanted to touch on one more quick little thing, and then we'll talk about calculating speeds for motorcycle crashes. Okay. So the only thing that I wanted to hit on real quick, where I was sort of going with that wheelie story too, is be careful, because when you go out and you try and figure out what a rider or driver can see in a crash, right? And we do this a lot. I mean, we always take pictures going through a crash scene. Right. And when we take pictures going through a crash scene, at what level do we hold the camera typically, Phil?
Yeah. Whatever level you're standing at. Most people.
Yeah. So I level the driver.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, like if somebody's riding a Corvette, I'm not going to hold my camera up at my eye level as I'm walking around. I'm going to hold it down like close to like my belly button. Right. Because realistically, when a Corvette is sitting, that's where the driver is going to be looking at. So if I'm taking pictures on his approach, that's where I hold it at. So be aware of that. If you have a motorcyclist riding a wheelie, do you actually know where the head position is of a sport bike rider who's riding a wheelie? It's actually almost eye level with a semi. They look, when you're on a wheelie, you will look over the tops of SUVs and cars. You're so high up in the air. So just be aware of that, when you're trying to figure out what this guy could see from up there, they're at a extremely elevated position because they're standing on the foot pegs that are raised up in the air, and then they're actually standing up. So, they add another 6 feet of height on top of the foot pegs that are 3 feet off the ground now because the bike's rotated up on its rear wheel. So, Realistically, they're about 8 to 9 feet in the air.
It could be. It depends, if you got a person who's standing and wheeling it, or are they sitting and wheeling a lot of.
Well, yeah, if you're sitting and just doing a power wheelie versus standing up and actually doing a controlled wheelie, yeah. So, but again, yeah, super important to know. And then also, just as we go into speed calculations, right? One of the first important things that we need to know is, and this kind of teeters the line between the rider behavior and then going into this of calculating speed. One of the first things we need to know is where impact happened at, right? And typically on a motorcycle crash, your gouges and scratches are going to start not at your area of impact. They're going to be off slightly because the bike's going to take a little bit to fall over. But is there a way that you could determine, because I would defy that, with a car, you're fine. If you know that it's in the northbound lane of this roadway coming into the intersection, you could just put it back in the northbound lane and run it through that lane. With a motorcycle, though, he could be in multiple places of that lane, and you can't just blanket apply. But is there a way, Phil, that you would know or could figure out where the rider is likely riding at in that lane?
Yeah, there's a number of.
If he's no longer with you,
the motorcyclist.
Yeah, say the motorcyclist died. How would you figure out where he rides, where he likes to ride inside of a lane?
There's two typical places motorcycles ride in a lane of travel, and it's in the tire lanes. So it's either the left tire lane, so driver's side tires, path of a car, or passenger. Very rarely do you have a motorcyclist traveling in the middle of the lane of travel.
Yeah,
because just about every motorcyclist out there knows that is going to be where all your oils and stuff like that, all your fluids that leak from vehicles, from engine seal or transmission seal failures, especially
at intersections.
Yeah, so they're riding the left tire track, predominantly in the left tire track or the right tire track. Yeah. Are they going to be exactly centered in that tire track? No, but at that point, if we're going to get on the stand and argue about 2 inches, I'll give you the 2 inches just to shut you up, because I'm not going to sit and have that 2 inch argument with you.
And arguably, just ask the family who rides with this motorcyclist, and go out and ask them what lane position they prefer, because motorcyclists are diehard about their lane position.
Yeah, every rider's got a preference.
Yeah, like I ride in the left tire mark towards the double yellow. Yep. Like it kills me. Like when we do parade formations and you put me against the curb, I have dang near a panic attack. I hate riding against the curb. I don't like it at all. But like my buddy Steve that I ride with, he is a curber. He hates being by the double yellow.
Yes, you're not like double yellow.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah. And so there you go. But okay. So now that we can identify the path the rider's taking, can we use that, Phil, to calculate speed of a motorcycle?
Absolutely.
We can? What? But I thought you can't use momentum to solve speeds on motorcycle crashes.
Yeah, and that's the mindset that's been out there for years, is that the weight ratio is so critical. Once you reach a X to 1 ratio, you can no longer use momentum. Well, that's not true. Because if you think about it from just a logical sense.
Well, let me put it this way. It can be true. And if you're going to use momentum with motorcycle crashes, it must be done with caution. And you must know what you're doing.
But to say that it just blanket putting a number out, that the equation only works until you get to this ratio, this to 1, that's not true.
Correct. It is not true.
You can go this far and then it doesn't work anymore.
Right. And we have proven that time and time again.
Yeah, because, at that point, the more further apart the two get in their ratios with one another, then it just becomes certain components of that type of investigation or that type of analysis become super, super, super critical. And other things need to start coming into play. It's not just simply, approach and departure angle and that's it, from a traditional, momentum consideration. You got to start looking at, a lot of other things, torque, wheel torque, and your yaw moments, just everything, your lever, just all sorts of things come into play. But it does work. I mean, we've had some car versus motorcycle collisions, not perfectly T-bone, but pretty daggone close. And it works very well.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Like you said, though, but with caution, you have I mean, things get very sensitive and things get very, you can't just throw numbers in there and it's not going to work that way.
Right. And so, the big thing I would throw out there then to an attorney is be aware when you guys are reading these reports, and especially on a rebuttal report, if you have an investigator who used momentum to solve speeds on a motorcycle crash, and then your expert on the flip side authors a rebuttal report that says, oh, well, he violated the laws of physics and blah, 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 and you can't use momentum. Everybody knows that, to solve a motorcycle crash. I would question your expert on his credentials of investigating. Has he been specially trained in motorcycle crashes, or has he not? And what's the other investigators training? Has he been? Because if he's been specially trained in motorcycles or has that advanced knowledge of using it properly, and you can use it properly, and applying the checks, because there are multiple checks that you should apply if you're using it, including an angle sensitivity test. But if the other investigator did that, you might have an issue with your investigator, actually.
Yeah. There's a number of different ways to skin the cat. Yeah. Sorry for the cat lovers out there. But
if you're a cat lover, then there's many ways to, I don't want to say skin. I don't think people don't skin dogs. Skin a deer? How about that? Can we go skin a deer? Or if you're a vegetarian, there's many different ways to peel a potato.
Or banana.
Or an animal love. Yeah. There you go. All right. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, we got off on some other tangent. I don't even know what we talked about.
Many different ways to skin a cat. Go ahead.
There's a lot of different ways to approach these motorcycles. And Eric, you and I, we kind of, I don't want to say joke about it because it's not funny, but we'll go back and have the discussion of the one motorcycle crash that literally, was done so many different ways and still came up with the same answers. And it works.
Yeah.
You just be careful.
And that's it. So in this case, guys, and just so you kind of understand where we're coming at, is it really validated, I think, mine and Phil's opinions on motorcycles, because Phil, so typically if you work a motorcycle crash, my rule is, and really in any crash, I like to solve for speed at least two different ways. Mm-hmm. In pretty much any crash, because that way, if you beat up on my momentum, I have something else. If you beat up on that, I have momentum, whatever the case may be. But so in this motorcycle crash, I think in the report, you had done the rider throw to get a speed. And then you did slide to stop for the motorcycle to get the speed, and they both matched. And then, so I'm like, great, it looks good. You did rider throw and slide to stop for the motorcycle. They match. The speeds look reasonable. Everything looks good. So we're done. So Phil gives me the report for peer review. I'm like, yep, great. Send it to the attorney. We're good. He then calls me back like 2 days later, and he's like, hey man, I really got to thinking about it, and I wanted to put momentum into this. So I solved for the motorcycle crash doing momentum. And I was like, man, Phil, what if you get a different answer than the other two that you already had? And he's like, well, just take a look at the report. So I read it, and I'm like, yeah, looks good, man. Yep. Numbers match. Everything is nice and consistent. We're good. Send it to the attorney. He calls me like 3 days later. He's like, hey man, I was sitting here and I wanted to confirm that speed. So I did rotational mechanics on the motorcycle impact. Can you take a look at it? And I'm like, okay, yeah. So now we've got rider throw, slide to stop, momentum, rotational mechanics. And I'm like, Phil, I swear to God, I'm like, it looks great. All of your numbers jive. Send it to the attorney. If you call me back and tell me you reworked the speed one more time, I'm going to come down there and beat you within an inch of your life. So, and I forget, did you work I think you worked at two different momentum ways, didn't you? Because then you found a different momentum way of working motorcycle crashes.
Yeah. And are you coming up with the same exact answer? No, you're not. And you should not. Right. But is it in the same range? Absolutely. It was. Every one of them were within the same range. And it was one of those type of crashes where it just was like, ooh, wow, really? Oh, man.
But and what made it so hard for you, I think, in that crash was because you had the premier law enforcement agency when it comes to crashes calculated a speed of what, 55, and you had a speed of 90 or 40. I think they had 45, didn't they? It's
somewhere around there. It was at and below.
Yeah, the speed limit, and you were coming in at like 85 to 95. Mm-hmm. And so there was such a big difference. And I know that's what weighed on your mind was, you're coming in and arguing over 40 miles an hour, and that 40 miles an hour made the difference between a felony and nothing.
Yeah.
And, it being the car's fault, not the motorcyclist.
And there's so many other things that when you're looking at motorcycle crashes, I mean, you need to look at certain things about motorcycle crashes. I think people overemphasize or spend too much attention on is the debris of the motorcycle, fairings coming off and seats coming off and things like that. And a lot of time people will be like, oh man, that motorcycle had to be flying. Not necessarily. I mean, those things come off very, very, very easily.
It's all held together with polyurethane and aluminum.
Yeah, and some of it's just push clips that hold them in place, and then there's a weak click, single latch click that holds the seat down. So I mean, when things like that come off, I usually don't pay much attention to those whatsoever. Now, when you have the bike, the triple tree ripped off of the bike and it's over here, and the rest of the chassis is over here. When you have two, big, heavy chunks in two different locations, the red flag to the investigator should be going up, because it takes a tremendous amount of force to rip the front forks off of a motorcycle and, send it a different direction. And that should be a clue to anybody that's going to investigate motorcycle crashes. You see that kind of damage, you need to back up a minute, slow your roll, slow down, and start really looking for the needle in the haystack on your evidence. Because you got a speed issue there.
Yep. And please don't be that guy or girl that when the front forks break off of the motorcycle and the triple tree just explodes, and they are found over in the tree line and your motorcycle is still at rest in the roadway, please don't carry the front forks over, lay them next to the motorcycle, and then measure them and get a speed from crush to the front forks. I believe at that point, I think you're outside the scope or the limitations of that formula.
Yeah, because
I think you have slightly exceeded what that formula can do.
And it's one of those things where you look at and in the particular case we're talking about, the thing that kind of drove me nuts in that case was, one, the triple tree was ripped away from the bike, and it was one place, and the rest of the chassis was somewhere else. But number two, the car that it hit it with such force that it literally pushed the car out of its way and continued through the lane of travel. Now, yes, it went off at an angle, but it didn't hit it, go over top of the car. It didn't hit it, stop, and then just slide off and, bounce off the car and slide off in another direction. It literally pushed the car, hey, get out of my way. I'm going to rotate you around, hit the ground, and I'm going to slide right on out, continue on my path of travel. I mean, that's all clues of holy cow.
Right. Yeah. And the same thing, in the crash, think about the one that I had, same thing I would say with motorcycle crashes, this is where it becomes even more important to apply the reasonableness standard. Okay. When you're an investigator, or if you're an investigator and you calculate a speed of a motorcycle crash, the first thing that you should do in any case, but especially motorcycle cases, is just take a step back and say, is this reasonable for what I have? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, like, for instance, in my, famous motorcycle case that I worked here, you had a sport bike that weighed 385 pounds. And granted, you had a little bit of a rider, but the rider came off. The rider came off before it even impacted the car. So you do have just the bike into the car. And the motorcycle hit the car on the back end, right on the axle, strongest part of the car, and broke the entire rear axle assembly and blew it out the drive. So he impacts on the passenger side, blows the entire axle, both front and rear tires, blows it out the driver's side of the car. And the car slams down on its trunk and gas tank and just rotates almost 180 degrees on asphalt. And the calculated speed from the other investigator was 35. 35 and a 35 for the motorcycle. And you got to step back and say, is that even reasonable?
Yeah. And that's the things you need to look at, in weight, the weight of the motorcycle. I mean, like you said, you're talking 390, 400 pound motorcycle is causing that kind of a damage. It has to, the lighter the bike, the higher the speed, most generally, if you did
that's Newton's second law.
It's got to have more speed than a heavier bike. So, I always tell guys and girls that I know that we've talked about these or they've called with questions. Take a look at what your evidence is telling you. Number one, always trust your evidence. But number two, look at go out there and I'm not saying use them as any kind of evidentiary value, but use them as a checks and balance for reasonableness of your investigation. Look at some staged crashes with motorcycles. If you've got a 600 pound bike coming in and hitting a car in the left rear, and it pushes the car, it rotates the car 20 degrees, and it's a 40 mile an hour staged crash. But your car, you look at the comparable weights, and they're pretty close, and your car moved, 120 degrees. Is that a 40 mile an hour crash? No.
Right. Yeah.
It's not.
Or when your motorcycle splits a car in half at the B pillar.
Yeah. You just use these tools out there. And I'm not saying that's, your validation, but if nothing else, it should get you to start, here's what I calculated. Man, I just don't know. I want to look at some staged crashes.
Yeah.
And whatnot. Again, it's using resources that are out there, but motorcycles are a different animal. You got to look at the articulation. You got to look at everything about them. And then you have to, the rider is a big part of that too.
Yeah.
If the rider separates at impact or at maximum engagement, does that rider throw have a value to your investigation? Absolutely.
Yep. And I'm going to go out on one more limb, and then we're going to wrap it up and give our final thoughts. But I will tell you guys, if you're investigating motorcycle crashes, the best thing, the number one tool you can do, and I'm going to give them a little shout out here right at the end of the show. Virtual Crash, their the new software, especially VC5, is amazing at motorcycle crashes because when me and Phil owned all the different softwares, for the most part, I think there was only one that we didn't look at or try. But for the most part, all the other ones, you can put the motorcycles in and you can animate a little bit about them. But with the virtual crash, what makes it so powerful is the physics generator that's in there, the physics engine, where your bikes do lean, they bank. When they impact, you'll actually see them pitch. They'll throw riders off of them and throw so it's a neat tool to have as a secondary check, right? Because in crashes, and this is one of the things that me and Phil learned in Florida when we attended their live training, which if you have virtual crash and you haven't been to the live training, you need to go sign up, because what I learned, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what probably the biggest thing that blew my mind that I didn't even think about, okay, is we work crashes from final rest back to the start of the event, right? So we work in reverse order, whereas with the virtual crash, with it being a simulator, it's actually a forward-thinking model. It's a predictive model based on physics. So it works from front to end. So if you put a car out there and you run the bike into it, it'll throw the rider off and assume where the rider is going to land based on physics. So you can start changing the angle of impact and speed of the motorcycle. And as you're doing it live time, you see the rider's where he lands change until all of your evidence matches. So you can actually use the simulator as a third check to the speed that you calculated from your hand calculations.
And I can already see the argument or the attempted argument. I can literally see a particular person standing in a courtroom, just flashbacks, and trying to argue that you're making the simulation, model what you want it to be. No, the simulation is modeling and mirror, or I shouldn't say modeling. The simulation is matching the evidence, and that should correlate to your hand calculations. So, I guess the disclaimer I want to put out there to anybody that's listening that is an investigator: do not put your use your whatever your CAD drawing program is. Bring your points in, make your scale drawing, run your simulation, and then stop. You need to be doing. Don't use that as a scapegoat to not do your hand math. Do your freaking hand math, because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I said, that simulation would be a third check, because you would do. I would calculate speed by hand 2 different ways, and then you could check it as a third.
Yeah, because I think I would hope that I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. There's people that will put that stuff into their program because they have so much faith and trust in the program that this is it. It's never been wrong before, so I'm going to put it in again. And after the 200th case they worked in that same program, they have absolute 100% confidence in the accuracy of it, that they'll just set aside hand math and do maybe just minimal hand math. No, you do it all, and then see how it lines up. Because if you do your hand math and then you take those results and plug them into your simulator and it doesn't match, guess what? Something's wrong in your hand math. You got an angle wrong, or you got something wrong. So but if you work motorcycle crashes, reach out to Conley, and I feel like we should take a dig at Bob and be like, because he's the one that made the software anyway. So I can already see the hate mail from Bob. But no, reach out to Conley and just ask him for a quick demo on motorcycles. If you work motorcycle crashes, just reach out to him, ask for a quick demo on what the program can do with motorcycle crashes, and check this thing out. It's wild. So. Yeah. But Phil, all right, so let's wrap it up for everybody, because, man, we actually, just the two of us, have gone longer than what we typically go to, because we're just so passionate about motorcycles. But bring it to the people, man. The one little iota of wisdom that you have in your brain housing group, that one nugget of wisdom that you want to get out to everybody. What could somebody do today to make sure they're investigating motorcycle crashes at least better than they were yesterday? Don't believe every myth that's out there that you cannot investigate a motorcycle crash using this approach because of this reason. I recommend you try it. And how does that line up with your evidence? How does that line up with your witnesses? How does that line up with everything? If it doesn't fit, okay, fine, find another approach. Don't pigeonhole yourself with only because it's a motorcycle, I can only do it this way. There are, as we talked about before, at least 4 different ways you can do motorcycle crashes, including momentum. And it can be done. Just understand what the sensitivities are. But don't not at least make the attempt because someone somewhere, either in training or at a scene, told you you can't do that. That is so frustrating because it's just not correct. It may have not worked for them in the 5 times they did it, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means it didn't work for them 5 times. Yeah.
And in the famous manual that I'm thinking of, where it even said, a lot of people point to it and they're like, well, he says you can't do it. And he does not say that, FYI. If you read any of these, the big famous reconstruction manuals that I think most of us base 90% of what we do on, right. They always label that section when it addresses momentum as just potential problems.
Right.
That means that it could be a problem. It doesn't mean you can't do it. Right. It just means you need to be aware that there are some potential issues that can arise. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where, okay, in order to use it and for it to function and give you the results that maybe, or the results you're looking for or trying to get to, I should say, not looking for, you may have to account for more things. Okay, fine.
Yep, exactly. So, and my little iota of wisdom then that I will leave you guys with is when it comes to motorcycle crashes, this is one where the human element is arguably the most important. So if you're doing a recon report, when it comes to a motorcycle crash, the human section of that report should be very large, including training, experience, background, riding history, all of that stuff, interviews with family, friends, people that ride with them. All of that needs to be accounted for, because if you don't have it, there's no way that you were the most accurate that you could be. Now, I get it. Sometimes the family won't talk to you. Sometimes riding people won't talk to you. Sometimes, they're going to refuse, but you at least need to make the attempt.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, if you don't have that, it's just going to open your range. Your range is going to be wider instead of, maybe narrowed up a little bit, but your range of results is just going to be open. You're going to have a bigger window.
Yeah, 100%. So, well, that's going to wrap it up for the day, guys. As always, if you have a case that you want us to review for free, or you just want to connect with us, jump on over to crashtechreconstruction.com. Also, remember to follow us on Facebook at Crash Tech, the Expert Angle Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our show and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crash Tech Reconstruction Services. And finally, remember to always leave your accident victims better off than you found them, because at the end of the day, everything we do is for them.